Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Brian Drury. Now, for anyone who's new to the show, Overcoming Graduation is a podcast designed to teach you everything you want to learn about life to live the life of your dreams. And I do this by interviewing incredible, amazing people from all over the world who have overcome graduation in their own unique and beautiful ways to show you that anything is possible when you are willing to put in the work and strike out and make your unique contribution to the world. So today I'm going to be interviewing Lane Robinson, aka the Stress Slayer. Now her story is interesting because when she was growing up, the way that society told her and women in that era was that if they wanted to get a job and they wanted a career in the future, they had 5 options. It was nurse, flight attendant, teacher, secretary, or wife. And oddly enough, Lane, being a person who has gone on to receive not only a undergrad degree, but an MBA, and has been successful in working in corporate America as a consultant. In her household, her parents didn't believe in educating women. But rather than accept this limiting belief and this limiting ideal, Lane struck against it and went out and chose her own path. Now, her time in corporate America taught her a lot about how to work with people, how to operate in the big system, but something about it felt off. And she said to me that when her office ID badge started to feel like a 20-pound weight around her neck, she knew it was time to make a change. She left corporate America, she began consulting, and her career really took off because she had a wide range of experiences and background that most people didn't have. But everything came to a screeching halt the day that she got in a near-fatal car accident and her whole world was turned upside down. She was diagnosed with short-term memory loss. The doctors told her about her chronic pain and that she wouldn't be able to function in society without all kinds of painkillers, anti-anxiety medicines, and so on. And the doctors even predicted that she would likely lose the ability to walk 15 years from the time of her accident. Now, 18 years later, Lane has cracked what she calls crack the code on how to slay stress in your life. And now she's working to spread this message to the world. So in today's interview, Lane will discuss the ABCs of stress, why most stress is synthetic, and how to determine your unique stress profile. And this is going to help you not only identify the ways to better manage and moderate your own stress, but how to communicate with other people and make sure you're not triggering your significant others or your friends and family stress profiles. The story of how a near-fatal car accident changed her life forever. She'll also discuss how she overcame her health problems by ignoring everything the doctor said and taking a turn towards alternative medicine, qigong, and a unique type of massage that I've never heard of before until this interview. She'll also tell you how to know when it's time to leave the corporate world and strike out on your own. She'll explain some of the effects of the anti-anxiety and anti-depression medicines that were recommended to her and why she avoided them. And she'll also give her advice on how to crush any presentation, no matter where you work, whether you're in corporate consulting, whether you're in the corporate world, or if you're an entrepreneur pitching your first business idea to a new potential investor. So that is what we've got on tap for you guys today. I'm very excited to share this story with you and connect you with Lane. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to Lane Robinson. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Brian Drury. Now, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling a little tense, a little off, this is the episode for you because I am very fortunate to have my guest on, Lane Robinson, who is also known as the Balance Guru, but even more so is known as the Stress Slayer. So, Lane, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Brian. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you. For the listeners, we have been trying to do this since we met at an event last year, and we've had a variety of different things that have interrupted us, my appendicitis in Paraguay being one of them. So we're very excited to finally be talking. Lane is a fantastic person. She's got just a very infectious, positive energy that you can't help but feel as soon as you meet her, and you guys are going to be able to feel it just from hearing her. So, Lane, I love your story. I was reading up on you at your website, thestressslayer.com, earlier, and I remember you shared a bit of your story at the event, but I even got to get a bit more as I was reading about you. So I'm very excited for you to share this story, because I know that these summaries that people put in their about pages on their websites give the highlights and the lowlights, but I like to hear even more depth into the journey. So this show being Overcoming Graduation, I always like to start off with school and whether or not the person graduated, but I know, as we just discussed, you have an MBA, so you've done more school than most. So can we start off with your undergrad graduation, what that looked like, what you studied, and what your views were on the world at that point?
Sure. Before we do that, I'd like to do a commercial for the first step, because I just want to congratulate you on your best-selling book.
Thank you.
I love the book, and all of the cool people, the coolest people, have read it. And what I love the most about it, because I've written some books myself, but there's so many things to love about it. It's a fictional book about a really important nonprofit cause, but there's also the protagonist, Will, keeps this journal, and that book is packed full of wisdom and is a great reference book for people. So I just encourage people. I can't imagine there's anyone who's listening to this podcast who hasn't read it yet. But anyway, then we'll talk about me, okay?
Well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate that. You're the first person who's done that on the show, so that means a lot to me.
Okay.
And
so go ahead.
I was gonna say, and until March 5th, I'm still donating 100% of the profits to My Team Triumph. So after that point, 10% of every book will go to My Team Triumph. So thank you very much, Lane. Now let's get to it.
Okay, so. When I went, this is going to sound really weird because I'm like in your parents' generation. I know I sound like I'm 23 years old on the phone. My voice still hasn't changed yet. But when I graduated from when I graduated from high school, women basically had 5 options for careers, believe it or not. You could be a teacher, a nurse, a secretary, a flight attendant, or a wife.
Huh.
And so I chose teacher, but I was raised in a family with 3 daughters, and my parents didn't believe in educating women. Can you believe that?
Wow. Meeting you, that's an extra surprise. I would have thought they were extremely supportive and, helping you get there. So wow.
No. So they and then my father thought that teacher was the lowest life job on earth.
Wow. Oh my God.
And my parents did not support me. So it took me 6 years to get my undergraduate degree, and I worked about 2 or 3 jobs.
Wow.
Because education was really important to me. I was a bookworm as a kid. I was the kid who was in my room reading books to inspire myself and was reading under the covers with a flashlight. The whole thing. Yeah, my senior year I was in honors calculus and pom-pom girls, and it took me till I was about 30 to work that out. That was my senior year in high school. So when I graduated from college, it was a big deal. And I remember I went to Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and we had graduation outside at Hughes Stadium. And typical of the Colorado weather, it was freezing. Freezing. And I had a blanket under my robe. We all had blankets. So at that time, I think my worldview was, here's my life and here's my checklist. And when you and I first met, one of the especially cool things is we had this conversation about definition of success, and we're going to talk about that when we talk about managing stress. But I thought that my life at that point was a checklist, and so here's what it looked like. Graduate from college, get a job, get married, purchase a home, right?
Right.
Have children, get a job with a major corporation, da-da-da-da.
Right. Yeah, just check all the boxes. Stay married,
the whole thing. Yeah. Live on a cul-de-sac with 2.5 children and a dog. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my life is that life is not a linear checklist.
Right.
That you don't check the box. It continues to change.
Right. And
that you will reassess that list on a frequent basis. If you're an evolving person, and you and I both are. So I think that was the big thing. When I graduated, I just thought, okay, chat. And then I got a job in an aerospace company because teachers back then made $5 an hour.
Oh my God. Wow.
I had a job offer for $11,000 a year. in as a teacher and like 20,000 as a computer operator.
Wow.
And I had student loans. So I went to work in aerospace, and back then women were secretaries. And so I became a professional and would convince these retired Air Force guys, oh, you should let me work on your team. I know I'm female, but I'm really good. And then about 7 years into that experience, I realized that I didn't fit in the corporate world, and I finally realized that it wasn't me, it was the box that I was trying to fit in, and that I needed to explore my own thing. And then that's when I went back to school for my MBA and started my consulting firm before I was even 40. So. And
Lane, just to dig into a point there, because I think that's a really pivotal moment that you had where you felt this, I'm just not in the right place. And what I know is that a lot of people listening to this show are feeling that right now. So can you tell them some of the feelings that you were experiencing that were the indicators to you that you needed to make a change?
Sure. And I think it's important too that you learn to define success on your own terms and learn what makes you tick. So self-awareness is really huge for people. And I was even at the point where I was married to someone who worked in the same corporation where I worked. And all of our friends worked in that same corporation. And we ate dinner at 6 o'clock every night in the same house. I'm not kidding. And everyone that we knew was the same. And I kind of call it the white bread syndrome. And I know you and I agree with this because you're an international man of mystery and you're a citizen of the world. And I like different kinds of bread. Not just pumpernickel, not just sourdough, but I like, chapati, and I like naan. Right. And so I was bored to tears.
Yeah.
And I had some challenges. Back then I rescued men. I don't do that anymore. And I just realized that my life was never going to change. And I woke up one morning and my soul just felt like total blackness.
Wow.
And I also knew, when you go to work in that corporation and that badge feels like it weighs 20 pounds around your neck. And then you're sitting in these meetings and you're like, I'm not like these people, right? I'm not like, one of these things like in Sesame Street is not like the other. That would be me. And so I finally just realized that I had to make a change. And I did go after my MBA. I worked in a corporation for 2 years, another corporation, got a divorce, never had kids. That was another thing for me. I would have probably stayed home and homeschooled or something, but I couldn't put my kids in daycare. And so I never had kids because I wanted to work.
Right.
And then everything just kind of changed for me and I really started to evolve. But I just saw a Steve Harvey video on Facebook the other day about how very successful people have one thing in common, and that's that you have to jump off the cliff. And I've jumped off the cliff many, many times, like probably 10. And there's a while before your parachute opens and you're bruised and bleeding. So what I would say to the people that are feeling like they're not in their place or they don't know where their place is, that's okay because the journey informs you. And
Lane, I was going to say, I love the point that you said about the badge feeling heavy, about feeling out of place, because I've experienced, in my first job, there were times where I experienced similar feelings. So for the listeners, if you listen closely to what Lane is saying, if you feel out of place, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. What it means is that you may need to change your place, your environment, the people that you're surrounding yourself with. Because if everything that you're saying, these big ambitious dreams and these ideas to make a difference in the world, if everyone looks at you like you're crazy or like, yeah, well, that's never going to happen. Well, there are tons of people out there who will look at you and be like, that's great. How are you going to do it? And they'll support and inspire and motivate you. So keep in mind, when Lane delivers that message about, I just felt totally out of place, if you're feeling like that, then there is that's a good indicator for you that it may be time to make a change. And Lane, before you continue, there is a character on my show that is the train that goes by outside, and her name is Donna. And every time that Donna comes by, it's pretty unmistakable. All the listeners can always hear the train rolling by and the horn going. So Donna uses her time to advertise whoever is on my show. So for all the listeners, if you're enjoying today's interview and you want to learn more about Lane and find some of her amazing products, you can visit thestressslayer.com. So, all right, Lane, so you have got your MBA and you realized you wanted to do something different. Things were finally starting to fall into place, and what came next?
Well, I just wanted to say, you're right on. When you feel like you're not fitting in, mm-hmm. It's not you that's not fitting in. Mm-hmm. That you're cool. You just need to you need to pursue a different path. And a lot of times when you feel like you're not fitting in, that's the phone call. Mm-hmm. From the universe or God or whoever you want to say that says, wait a minute, you need to just kind of look at your path a little differently.
Right.
And maybe make some changes. So I totally agree with you there, and I think it's important. And I think the first time you and I met, what was so great is we were talking about how you had grown up in the Midwest and you knew that you weren't going to do all the things the other people were going to do, and people told you to never do this, they'll never do that. So don't listen to those people.
I grew up on the East Coast. I spent 2 years in the Midwest. The Midwest was where I was working, and I felt out of place. So
okay, there we go.
I just have to clarify. I'm a Jersey boy, Lane. This is important.
I can hear it in your accent. But yeah, so I'm a New Yorker. I was born in Queens, but nobody knows that.
Well, there you go.
Because I only lived there for 6 months of my life. But anyway, Yes, that's right. You were in the Midwest. You didn't grow up there. Okay. So your question was, I got my MBA, mm-hmm. and I went to work for a corporation for 2 years, and then this is really weird, but I felt this totally strong calling to go to San Francisco because I had worked on a project there for the corporation, mm-hmm. in which I was working, and I loved it because of the diversity, and I loved the Golden Gate Bridge, and everybody's smart, and the architecture, and I just I was like a kid in a candy store when I did this project there. And so I went to work for a boutique consulting firm in LA to just learn how to be a consultant. And then I moved to San Francisco and started my own independent consulting practice when I was in my late 30s. Mm-hmm. And I just loved every minute of it.
And were you doing specifically marketing, or what type of consulting were you doing, and what were you helping these companies achieve?
I started out as a marketing consultant, mm-hmm. and I'm kind of a weird marketing consultant because I'm a marketing writer, plus I do strategy, plus I do research. Most people do one or two.
Okay.
And then I realized, wait a minute, this was during the dot-com boom when I started my company 20 years ago, and when Company A bought Company B, they had a big marketing problem. Mm-hmm. So I became an acquisition integration consultant. Huh. And I also had operations experience and systems experience, so that's when my practice really took off. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I just loved living in the city, and I got rid of my car, and then I moved to Southern California because I had a client in San Diego, and I was flying. My car would come at 5:30 on Monday morning, and I would come back on Friday afternoon. So I didn't really have a life. My life was really my work.
Right.
And then I decided to move from San Diego to California, and then that's when the universe changed my mind.
Okay.
So do you want me to tell you about that?
Absolutely. I would love to hear all of the details.
Okay. So I had my dream car, which was this pearl white Audi A4 mm-hmm. with tan leather interior. And I drove to Denver ahead of the moving van. Mm-hmm. And I was staying with relatives. It was the Monday after 4th of July, and I actually had my 10-month-old nephew in the car with me. I was driving him to daycare. His parents went to New York to mm-hmm. spend time with some of my brother-in-law's family for the holiday, and I was taking care of my 10-month-old nephew for 5 straight days. Well, he got sick on day 2, and he got bronchitis, and I got bronchitis, and I didn't sleep the whole weekend, and I was driving him to the first day he was going to daycare, mm-hmm. driving through a solid green light, and I saw this car coming out of the left side of my eye, barreling down the turn lane, and the guy just turned into me, had the sun in his eyes, and he was daydreaming. And he didn't even brake till after he hit the car.
Wow.
So the car did a 360 plus a 180 revolution.
Wow.
And opposite tires blew out, and we stopped about 3 inches from this huge steel utility pole that had we hit it, we both would have died.
Wow.
I walked away from the accident, and my nephew, thank God, nothing happened to him. He was fine.
Yeah, thank God for that.
Oh, because that would have just been the worst. And the firefighters told me had I not been driving the Audi that we both would have been killed.
Well,
so had I just been driving a regular sedan, yeah.
You know what, Lane? I was going to say it was your dream car for a reason then. So it's kind of interesting. It's not just about the flashy car. It's God or whatever you choose to believe in was setting you up for that car for this moment. So, okay, please continue.
And it was funny because that morning, it was the summer, July 6th, but it was a little blustery, so I had gone back to the house to get a sweatshirt for Grant. And so we were supposed to be in that intersection.
Yeah.
And then the next day, I walked away from the accident. I felt fine, and the next day I felt like someone had beaten me with a baseball bat.
Wow.
From the top of my neck to the bottom of my back. And I went to a chiropractor and a doctor, and they said I'd suffered a traumatic brain injury. So within about 2 weeks of the accident, I started having these symptoms like fog in my head. I couldn't sleep. I had pain in my hands and feet. I'd been kind of a non-emotional person, maybe cried 5 times in my life.
Wow.
And I started crying at TV commercials.
Mm-hmm.
I became very emotional, very sensitive. And the second doctor referred me to Craig Rehabilitation Hospital in Denver, and I didn't realize it at the time, but you don't even get referred there if you're not toast.
Wow. So essentially going to this rehab center is saying you've pretty much had a brain injury that you won't come back from, essentially.
Or a lot of people have disabling injuries, so they're paraplegic.
Oh, okay.
It's an amazing hospital.
Okay.
Very, very well known and respected.
Mm-hmm.
And so the neuropsychologist basically told me, well, you're going to have to take your symptoms, the pain will never go away. The insomnia is going to be a challenge. You may get rid of the fog in your head. I had a photographic memory before the accident, and I had short-term memory issues.
Mm-hmm.
Had to remember where I put the grocery list. Couldn't remember what was on it.
Wow.
And so I said, I'm a management consultant. I can't take breaks every 15 minutes,
mm-hmm.
which is what he suggested. He said, or you won't get through the day. And he said, well, to be honest, you're probably never going to be able to work again.
Wow.
Okay, so my career is my whole life.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're going from being a management consultant and owning your own practice. You're doing a lot of very kind of cutting edge things in the .com boom.
Yeah.
You've got your dream car. Everything is going the right way.
Right.
And then life throws you this curveball, and they're telling you might need to take breaks every 15 minutes in order to just get through your day, and you may never sleep normally again. So Can you tell the listeners a bit about the feelings and the emotions that surrounded that? Like, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to receive that news.
Well, I was in denial.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had been able to do heavy lifting my whole life and think my way out of everything.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of the good news, because the other thing was that he said, we need to sue the guy who hit you, and all the doctors have already talked, and we will testify at your court case. Okay, I'm just trying to get out of bed in the morning and make it through the day, and now they want me to file a lawsuit.
Right.
And I did go talk to the attorney because one of my doctors was so insistent. But then the neuropsychologist said, here's what we also need to let you know. Within about 15 years, you won't be able to walk.
Wow.
And that was 18 years ago, so you saw me walk.
Yes.
And also you need to take Prozac, sleeping pills, and painkillers.
Wow.
Or you won't be able to cope. So a couple years before my car accident, I had knee surgery, and half of Vicodin blasted me into outer space.
Wow.
So I just knew I couldn't take the drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do anything the doctors told me to do.
I was going to say, essentially, with the prescription they gave you and the predictions they gave you, you would be living, I mean, I understand it's like from their prognosis, you would need these things in order to survive and get through the pain and just to function normally.
Yeah.
So, I imagine a lot of people would not only be in denial, but would say like, oh, well, that's permission enough for me to give up. But I know that you did not. And when you said you saw me walking, I saw you dancing, I saw you strutting, I saw you doing a lot more than walking. So
Well, yeah, they said the pain in my feet would be so bad. And I also have tested my stress-laying system in residential rehab for drug addiction recovery. And when the doctor there, when she heard my story, she said, "You'd be dead by now." had you taken those drugs, your body never would have been able to do it.
Wow.
For a prolonged period of time. So what did I do then, Brian?
What did you do? That's what we're dying to hear.
Luckily I had this great holistic chiropractor, and I was doing traditional massage. But I even have pain issues. Like if you come and just push me on the shoulder with your finger, it really hurts. I still have that. But I found this alternative therapy called craniosacral massage. So you have a pulse in your head and in your brain. I didn't know this. You have a pulse at the end of your tailbone. And you can use energetic therapy to balance those pulses so that the energy moves up and down your spine. And after that started working for me, I went to a craniosacral healer who said to me, "You need to go study Qigong." And I went and studied Qigong with one of the top Qigong masters in the world, who happens to live in Minneapolis when I lived in the Twin Cities.
What's the name of that instructor?
Chini Lin.
Oh, okay, because I love Lee Holden, and I read his book, and I did his Qigong, so I was like, if it's Lee, that's going to be crazy. But
Oh, yeah. No, Chini Lin teaches you how to do energy healing with Qigong, and at first, I just did it on myself, and I felt extremely uncomfortable. I was the only person in the class who wasn't a therapist, a doctor, a nurse, a psychologist. I was a consultant, and I was going to these classes, and then I realized that I had an aptitude for energy healing, which was a whole nother trip. But I basically, today, it took me about 9 years to figure it all out. I never took the drugs. I never took a prescription. I drank a bunch of red wine for a while, I have to be honest.
I appreciate the honesty.
But today, I will say it took me about 9 years to develop the protocol that I use every day to get out of bed in the morning. When I met you, we were doing long days in a very uncomfortable chair. So I was in quite a bit of pain. And next time I go, I'm going to ask them for a different chair, I think. Just because, But I live symptom-free, 90% symptom-free on any given day, and I did consulting. My clients understood. I just took easier projects, and slowly but surely pretty much healed my brain. I got most of my photographic memory back. I have my energy back. I don't really have pain unless I have a big stressor, like if I move my residence, for example, where I'm carrying heavy boxes, my hands will hurt, and those kind of things. But really, I cracked the code, and I'm really grateful that I discovered this method.
Well, first off, it's incredible. It's one of those rare success stories. It's the type of thing that if you hear about it from a third-party account, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm sure, like, oh, I know this person who got in this car crash, and they told her that she needed medicine, but in reality, she just did energy healing, and she was great. And you'd be like, yeah, sure. But it's like, I remember meeting you and being like, that's amazing. And I'm looking at you, and you're standing right in front of me. And I know that prior to me getting into personal development and starting to try many of these things, I was, I guess, afraid or just skeptical about some of them. But for anybody listening, the book 7 Minutes of Magic by Lee Holden, if you want an introduction to Qigong, that is a great place to start. It gives you a 7-minute morning and evening ritual to show you, kind of like give you an intro into Qigong. But Lane, for any of the listeners, could you give them a little bit more about what Qigong is and what it does for you?
Yes. Qigong is, I don't know if you've ever seen Tai Chi. Tai Chi is where you see the people in the park doing the movement. So Qigong has a couple of components. And different masters train differently, but there's a movement component to Qigong, and there's also a meditative piece to Qigong. And so for me, I think what it taught me, one of the things that I learned in my journey is that in order for me to manage pain, and in order for me to get through the day, I had to have life management skills, but fatigue management and pain management equals stress management. And so I needed to learn to reduce the amount of stress in order to reduce my symptoms. So Qigong is I mean, thousands and thousands of years old, and there are different forms of it. But basically, it teaches you to work with energy through physical movement and meditation.
Yes.
Do you agree with me?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that's a very perfect, concise way to say it. Normally when I describe things, I tend to drag it out and do like 10 sentences, which you did in one. But for me, I found it to be very relaxing and also relaxing at night, rejuvenating in the morning. And when I started meditating, I do it a lot more now, but when I started, I struggled with it because, me and you, type A, high energy, we want to be moving, we want to be getting stuff done. And I was like, at first I couldn't see the benefit. I was like, why, what is sitting quietly going to do for me? So Qigong was kind of like a gateway meditation. It got me started and showed me the benefits and gave me like some great stretching that I deeply needed. And then that helped me migrate into real meditation, which has been a huge part of my life. So now what I'm very curious about, and I'm sure all the listeners are, is what is this formula you developed? And can we talk a bit about the different ways that you were able to manage both fatigue and pain to overcome this stress?
Right. So the formula is a 3-step process. And a couple of years ago, I realized that I had something unique, and I tried to market it to traditional hospitals to train nurses, basically, on how to relieve stress, but then also how to clear, balance, and protect their energy after every patient encounter. And so I kind of led with the alternative piece, and I made those people nervous, and nobody pulled the trigger.
Right.
So last summer, I decided to package my system, my 3-step process. And so basically, when we look at stress, and people don't want to admit, I'm finding that they have a problem with stress.
Right.
I have people who are having brain seizures and going to a neurologist, people who are having panic attacks, people who are having night terrors, and they say, oh no, I don't need a stress management program.
Right, yeah, just give me some drugs and that'll take care of it.
That's what's interesting. 1 in 4 American women right now between the ages of 40 and 50, Brian, is taking an anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication. Wow. And they're starting to ask for them at the doctor. And I just read a study that was done by French Canadians last year, and there's an article in the New York Times. The blog is on my homepage, but if you take more than 90 daily doses of a benzo drug, which is an anti-anxiety med like Xanax, sleeping pills like Ambien, Lunesta, your risk of developing Alzheimer's goes up by between 30 and 80% depending on how long you take the drug. And it doesn't matter over what time period. Once you get to the 91st dosage, your risk skyrockets.
Wow.
So I'm really against chemically mind-altering drugs, I've got to tell you. And that's kind of my mission, to bring healthy balance to the world, and so people don't have to take a pill. There are so many better ways. But basically, I realized that you have to reduce the amount of stress that's coming into your system. And here's the interesting thing about stress, that unless your life is being threatened, or unless you've experienced a traumatic physical injury like you broke your leg, or an emotional trauma like someone died, or you broke up with someone, or you got divorced, or whatever, stress is all in your head. It's synthetic. And I can prove this to you, Brian.
Oh, go ahead. Prove it.
So every person has their own unique stress profile. What induces stress for one person releases stress or calms another person. Let's take salsa dancing. Something I know that you love, is a great stress reliever for you. I agree with you totally, but I know quite a few people, especially American men, who would rather have a root canal than salsa dance.
This is true.
Right. So you want to understand your own stress profile. So when stress comes into our environment, it comes in, and these are the ABCs of stress slang. So basically it's attitude, body, calming, right? Okay. Attitude is made up of 4 things: your definition of success, your personality preferences, your beliefs, and your fears. And when we look at those, that's what causes synthetic stress. And then when I talk about the body, I'm all about chemical avoidance. And what's really interesting is, if your body is stress resilient, it's not directly correlated to your physical fitness. So you can be very physically fit, and you can make lifestyle choices that expose yourself to a ton of chemicals, and you will be very vulnerable to stress. And this is one of the first things I learned after my accident. I couldn't tolerate chemicals.
Yeah. And I mean, from the physical perspective, it's something where a lot of people will look at someone who is in great physical condition and assume that that person has things all figured out because, oh, they have that thing that we as a society deem as very valuable in they've got the perfect body or they've got the rock hard abs or the perfect butt. And then we look at that and say, oh, well, they've got to have everything figured out. And kind of culturally, we have a tendency to assume that for most things. We see someone who has a lot of money and we assume they've got life figured out. But what you and I both know, and I'm sure we see frequently, is what ends up happening is people tend to be very good at one or two of the health, wealth, and relationships. And they tend to have one or two figured out, and then one tends to fall out of balance, or two can fall out of balance, and even in extreme cases, everything can feel out of balance. So please continue. The attitude thing is very interesting.
Right, and then the flip side is you can look at someone who doesn't look like they're physically fit, and you think, oh, they don't have anything going for them.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Mm-hmm. So I guess, and then the third thing is calming, and there are actually 7 calming activities that work for everyone. Things like hydration, sleep, meditation. So there's 7. Mm-hmm. Laughter, right? Uh-huh. And then there are certain calming activities that just work for specific people. So that's essentially my program, but here's what's really cool. Is when you understand your own stress profile, and actually I have an audio course with a workbook. Mm-hmm. You can take that workbook to your significant other or your work team, and you can evaluate their stress profiles, and you can quit pushing their stress buttons, and you can honor their calming activities, and it's huge in terms of bringing balance into your life.
Okay, so that I love because I think a lot of people are, even me for a second, when you first said, I'm like, are you saying to just force it on them? And when you said evaluating what are their stress triggers, effectively what this is doing is just teaching you to be an excellent communicator and being an excellent observer. Because when you understand what triggers someone's stress, kind of conversely, you're also going to see what helps them to be relaxed and to feel loved. So essentially, what you're teaching is a way for people to not only understand themselves better and communicate with themselves better, but also to use that same system to do so with people anywhere in their lives.
And I actually have a test that you take to figure it out. So
okay.
I have exercises that you can share with people. Mm-hmm. And I think you could even use it if you're thinking about marrying someone. You definitely want to understand their stress profile. And you also want to make sure that you have a shared definition of success for your relationship and your marriage and your life. Now, the things that you don't agree on, you have to agree to disagree and honor. Mm-hmm. So if one of you needs a more quiet time, if one of you needs more sleep, that's part of your stress profile too. If you would use the exercises with your inner circle, it's very, very powerful. So a lot of different ways that you can implement. But I think most people don't really understand that stress is unique to each person. And also, I have had personal trainers that come to me who went and took antidepressants, and they said, I can't figure out why I'm not just so perky and happy because I teach people to work out every day, right? They work out a lot.
Right.
So working out actually can be a calming activity, but each person needs their own workout regimen that works for them too, and that calms them. So if your exercise regimen stresses you out, then a lot of personal trainers and psychologists talk about stress, but they're not experts. And the way I became an expert is I saved my own life. So that's why I think I know so much about it, because I had to figure it out or I was done. Game freaking over. Yeah.
A very high-level consultant, like big time. She was talking to me about this because I said I was having doubts about my ability to impact people because I said, well, I don't have a degree in this, or I haven't taken any classes, or I didn't get certifications. And she said, well, Brian, there's 2 ways where you can gain credibility in a topic, and the school way or the certification way is one, and the other is the school of hard knocks, and you can learn it from life in the streets. And often what I found is from a lot of entrepreneurs, they have done so, they have achieved their credibility or their success in their field not by studying in that field and getting a degree from the best university. They've done it by doing things differently, looking at the problem differently, and then applying their own unique solutions and then sharing those solutions with the world. So it sounds like a very similar path that you're taking, where it's you needed to learn this, otherwise you would be dead. Like you said, that doctor told you, if you had followed their instructions and followed their treatment plan, you wouldn't be here today able to share this message with the world. And for all the listeners, that brings me to one of my favorite quotes. And Lane and I actually met at a Sean Stevenson event, so that's very appropriate. But so this quote from Sean Stevenson is, "Never believe a prediction that doesn't empower you." So by Lane not accepting the prediction that she was given, and by choosing to believe in a greater, brighter future for herself, she was able to create this better life, this business, and now is impacting people in that way. So Lane, that's amazing. So can you tell us a bit about some of the biggest challenges you faced in creating this business? Because once you overcame all of those physical and mental challenges, which were huge, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in business? Because I know a lot of my listeners are young people that are interested in starting one. So what would be some of your recommendations for someone who's looking to start a business? What things should they do? What should they avoid? And what are some of the first steps they should take?
Okay. I think the first thing, you have to have, and I know this word is sometimes overused, but you have a better chance of having a successful business when you have passion around what you're doing. And when we look at definition of success too, we want to look, I have some questions about what did you love as a child before it all got edited out of you, right? And really make sure that you're doing something that you love to do. And people love to do different things. You know, when I started my consulting business, I loved traveling the world. I loved meeting people. I loved solving problems. I also wrote a book called Enlightened by Accident that talks about my story. Yep, that was my second book I ever wrote. And then I wrote a book called Stress-Free Success. So I love to write books.
Awesome. Me too.
And I know. And I also think that when people talk to me about my system, they say, you have so much passion around it. So I think also if there's some kind of cause or some kind of difference that you want to make in the world, that's a real motivator. I mean, even when I was doing management consulting and making really, really huge money, it wasn't necessarily the money that got me out of bed in the morning. It was solving the client's problem. And then I think that you also need to realize that you're not going to have a linear path, most likely, from A to B when you start a business.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a curvy road, and sometimes it's like, start this, fail. Try this, fail. You learn through failure. So if you really have an entrepreneurial mindset, you're going to be willing to continue to tweak and continue to try new things and continue to explore. And I think that is what fuels me, just that curiosity and that desire to make everything come together. And then I think you need to be open to having financial ups and downs. That's part of it. And you need to be able to know, you know, I've had days in my business where from one day to the next, I didn't know how I was going to live, you know?
Wow.
Seriously. But it just all works out. And I guess your passion and your desire to make it work, that has to be your overwhelming thing. And when you're nervous, focus on service. That's another big thing.
Ooh, I like that.
When things get really tricky, just focus on, what am I doing for people? Why am I doing this business?
I love that point. When you're getting nervous, focus on service. And it has a nice ring to it, but also has a great message, because oftentimes when a lot of the entrepreneurs that I listen to are successful business people, they talk about when things are getting bad, look at the people you're trying to help, ask how you could serve them better, ask how you could serve them differently, what unique problem could you solve for them? And then all of a sudden, those financial woes may disappear because you're suddenly bringing more value to a problem that these people desperately needed solved. Now, Lane, you alluded to some of the difficulties you had. Would you be willing to share one of your toughest or biggest mistakes that you made in running any of your businesses? Like one of the ones that really stands out in your mind as, wow, that was a hell of a learning lesson.
I just think the biggest thing is don't listen to people who aren't supportive. Don't let somebody else try to tell you how to run your life or your business. You have to be true to yourself. And I don't, this is going to sound really weird, but I don't really look at mistakes as a negative thing. I just look at mistakes as an indicator that you need to take a detour or that you're not doing the right thing. So for example, I can talk to you about the stress layer a little bit.
Yeah, please.
I do market to individuals, and it works for me, but one of the things I've learned is that I understand organizations. And so right now I have some organizations, a health insurance provider, a medical school, and a rehab hospital actually that are looking at implementing my program and piloting my program. And so also do what you're good at, because I've beaten my head against the wall for a long time just trying to make a living marketing to individuals. And the people who crack the code with the internet marketing and the the Facebook ads and bringing people in and the teleseminars, they can make a lot of money. We know that there are people making 5 figures, 6 figures, sometimes 7 figures a month doing it. But what I realized is that doesn't excite me, because what I'm driven by is making the biggest difference possible. And so for me, I think that if I can get an organization to implement my program, that they can reach more people.
Fantastic.
And that's where I feel comfortable, because I've worked with executives my whole career. So for me to go in and pitch to an organization about why they should look at my program and how it can benefit their customer, their people, that's really easy. So sometimes taking the easier road isn't the cop-out.
Right, because really, it's not about taking the easier road. It's focusing on your strengths and the things you do well, and emphasizing your strengths instead of trying to build up your weaknesses. And this is something that I'm a big believer in as well, because you get somebody who, for example, say they're a really good public speaker and they suck at math. And it's like, all right, do you want to spend your time trying to get better at math, or do you want to go and speak in front of people? It's like, and spread your message. That's where you can really shine, and that's where you have a gift. Now, that point you just brought up gave me, brought up a question I think a lot of people would be interested in, because many people listening are probably very early in their careers, or they're trying to start their own business and they need to do pitches for investors or to sell their product. And you said it's something that comes easy because you've done this forever. You've done it with big companies. You've done it with big executives. So can you share a couple of the key pieces of what you do to always have a successful presentation so that the listeners can use that and apply that in their lives?
Well, I think that you need to know that there's a need out there, and you have to be able to. Markets are created. Now I'm going back to my MBA and my background in business, but you need to identify a need, and you need to have, I think, the more unique approach that you have to solve it, and you also have to appeal to the bottom line, because anyone who's going to use your system needs to understand, I have a company that I want to take my system to once I get it proven that it's going to be a $250 million opportunity for them.
Wow.
If they sell to 10% of their customer base. So you need to do the math. But I think also if you're going to do a business case, go talk to your friends that are really good at crunching numbers if that's not what you're good at. When I would build those kind of presentations, I test them with people. As a consultant, I never did an executive readout without previewing with an executive I trusted. And that has saved my bacon more times than I can ever tell you. I call in that one executive that's influential, I trust, and say, will you just do a sanity check? And I've had people say to me, especially when I'm teaming with other consultants and we disagree, if you present this, you're dead.
Wow.
You know, so I think don't be afraid to let other people look at it and have other people weigh in that have skills that you don't have. And this is also when you can take advantage of mentors too in your life. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to tell you one more thing. A metaphor came to me as I was thinking. And one of the things I think in order to be successful as a small business owner, an entrepreneur, is you have to never, ever, ever, ever give up. Mm-hmm. And you have to just have that mentality. So there is, I don't know if you've ever heard the bamboo story.
No, I've not.
Okay, well, there is this species of bamboo that is underneath the ground for 5 years. It just barely peeks out. And you keep watering it and watering it and watering it. And when it's ready to grow, it grows 90 feet.
Wow.
In a matter of days, like 6 days.
Wow.
And it grows so fast that you can stand there and actually see it grow. So, you know, it's funny because I love Steve Harvey. Mm-hmm. And he talks about how it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. I think that's the other thing. Realize that you're not just going to become a big star overnight.
Right.
You might be. I mean, some people are. Look at Carrie Underwood, right? Mm-hmm. But not everybody. And that's okay, because the things that you learn on the journey will make you better as a professional.
Right.
And just never think that you have to have everything figured out in your life, because you're never going to have everything figured out. You're better off to have good questions than good answers.
Ooh, I like that also. And that was something that I struggled with for a while until I started investing in events and mentors to really push things forward. Was I had this perception that I'll start a business once I figure it all out. You know, once I've read every book and done everything to prepare, then I'll start. And what I later came to realize through a lot of self-reflection and then more reading, checking out videos, through a lot of work, I came to understand that all that was a cleverly disguised excuse. It was my way of procrastinating, but using a very clever trick to say, oh, no, I'm not procrastinating. I just want to make sure I'm ready and that it's good. But what I found from actually starting my own business is that you are much better able to identify the things that come naturally, the things that you already understand, and now you can identify the areas you need to grow and then focus your studies there. And to your point, it's a journey. It's, it takes time, and you learn this, you implement that, and you're like, great, okay, now what? And then the next step in your evolution and growth has to come. So it's everything you're saying, I completely agree with. Being someone who's just starting, a year old in his first business, it's so many of these things I'm like, yep. And one of the biggest ones you said, just in terms of understand it takes time. I remember when I started, I was like, okay, so if I generate, $5,000 a month, I'll make this much a year, and then I can, and then it's like, well, Brian, first you got to make your first product, and then you got to learn how to market, and then you got to learn how to distribute it, and all of these other things came up, and I was like, so I changed the way that I was perceiving my goals, and I stopped creating this pressure to have immediate success and started thinking of my goals as more long-term, and I started to have a lot more fun and enjoy the process more. So everything you're saying, I'm totally in agreement with here.
And that's what I was just going to say. You're never going to figure it all out. Mm-hmm. You're an evolving being. You're a lifelong learner. So if you think that you're just going to lock and load it, and someday your business is just going to be like, run itself. No. Or that, and also I think one of the challenges for the OCG generation is you guys have more pressure because of just all the input and the visibility than any other generation. I mean, you can't really hide anything. Mm-hmm. Privacy is really kind of going away, and everybody knows what you're doing. And you have input from, not just television, not just radio, but social media. And I also think that one of the things, just circling back on meditation, is it really helps you just turn down the input. Yeah. Because input drains energy too. And so I think that it's really important that you, in this society that you find a place of just solace and withdrawal sometimes, where you're not tuned in, plugged in, observing all this input, because really the excitement, if you're going to be successful, comes from within. And now we're getting all heavy and philosophical at the end,
but it's deep. Yeah, it's true.
But seriously, I think that if your goal is to figure it all out, then you probably should get a real job where you can go do the same thing every day and have it be predictable and safe and secure. And if that's you, that's cool. You know, I applaud you. Some days I wish I was that person. But if you're an out-of-the-box person, then learning to live out of the box is going to make you happier. And that's one of the things that we talk about too, just being different can be your greatest asset.
Yeah, it reminds me of, there's a number of quotes that I've heard that touch on this same topic, but essentially saying it's like, if you have all the answers, you're not tackling big enough problems. Or if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. It's to say, it's like, if you really want to be growing, you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone, because that's where the true growth happens. So if you want to be in a world where you feel like you can control everything and understand everything, you, like you said, either get something that you're going to do for a very long time, for the rest of your life, or get something very simple. But if you want to take on the big things, you have to be willing to understand that you're human, that you're not going to have it all figured out, love yourself along the way, and find the real joy and fulfillment from within.
I love how you talked about happiness and joy, because I know small business owners that aren't having any fun. And I think, why are you running your own business? And why do you have employees that can't have any fun? You know, having a good time and loving your work is really awesome and a great benefit. Especially when you spend, I mean, let's say 40 hours a minimum per minimum per week on that. It's like a lot of people, and this was a mistake I made early in my career, was looking at my life as work Brian and real Brian, and I like separated them. And I acted different, and I almost treated it like, well, that's not real life, you know, that's just my time at work. But then when I stepped back, I was like, all of this is real life, and me acting like a different person at work and trying to be all businessy and professional and not just being myself is holding me back and creating more stress and negative feelings than just being me and putting myself out there genuinely. And, you know, it's like, hey, love me or not, this is who I am, rather than trying to hide behind a very corporate kind of face to be like, oh, well, then I'll be accepted, then I'll be loved type of thing. So, Lane, since we are coming to the end of our time, I always close out my interviews with 2 questions. So the first one is newer, and the second has been here since interview 1. But the first one is, a lot of young adults, especially in this OCG community, have this idea that, you know, they don't have value, that they'll be valuable later, that once they get 5 years experience, like the resume or the job description says, once they get somewhere or get something, then they'll be valuable. But we know that young adults, whether they've gone to school or not, have tremendous value to bring to the world. So can you talk a bit about the unique value that you see that millennials bring to the world? Sure. First of all, I want to tell you that there was an article, I think it was in the Financial Times, by Ernst & Young, very conservative, big 6 consulting firm, is no longer requiring a degree.
I just saw that, yes, yeah.
to work there or to work there as a consultant. So one of the things that I think the OCG generation has is you have access to information at your fingertips on anything that you want to learn, and a lot of it's free. So you can feed your brain with so much amazing information, and you have tremendous opportunity for growth. I think where some of the challenges come in, and it will now circle around, remember when I told you that women, when I graduated from high school, had 5 choices of career. I think one of the challenging things, but also one of the greatest things about your generation, is you have so many options. You have so many options for what you're going to do with your life and where you're going to spend it. The world's a lot smaller. And so that's what I would just say is, and also now I'm going to have to get all spiritual on you, because this is just who I am.
Go for it.
Your soul is pure positive energy from the cosmos, from the creator, from God. You are inherently valuable, or you wouldn't be on the planet. And you're here for a reason. And you're here to figure out what you're great at and how you can contribute uniquely. And I think that's the question you should be asking yourself, is not what's my value, but what do I have to contribute? Well, that was heavy.
Love that. No, hey, that's part of the fun of having my own show, is that, like I tell people, I'm like, I want you to be real, authentic, be totally you, because part of this show is me becoming more and more myself, which sounds funny, but I want people to be their full selves. I want them to speak their truth, because that's part of what this show is about, is showing everyone who's listening that they have a unique message, they have a unique truth and a unique gift to bring to the world. And when they take the time to look inside and find it, they'll be amazed at what exists in their mind and their heart and their soul. So love that. And now we'll close out with the final question, which I love this one, and it's always interesting to hear the different guests' perspectives. So this question is, if you could go back to when you were graduating from college, and you can pick either undergrad or MBA, if you could go back to that time and talk to your younger self and give your younger self advice, what would be the advice you would give?
This is going to sound really funny, because I'm one of those people, and I know you've known these people, that felt old their whole life. And no, seriously, when I was, even in my 20s, I felt old. When I was 35, I felt ancient. I guess what I would say to myself is carpe diem, seize the day. The time is now. Mm-hmm. And all these numbers that you're using to calibrate yourself, whether it's your age, and I have to speak to women right now because I have a real concern about women and weight right now. It's not about your BMI or your FICO score or your zip code or your stuff. Mm-hmm. It's about you being your best self. Now I sound like Oprah Winfrey. I bet she's gonna call me. But seriously, finding that special value within yourself and contributing. I guess I've kind of hit this message a million times during the podcast, but I would just say don't paint within the lines. Don't color by numbers. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more out there.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you stay in the box that you were given, that you believe you're supposed to stay in, and that you don't really enjoy, if you're not willing to strike out into the darkness or into the unknown, you'll never know all the beauties and the wonder that life has. You'll never know about things that you would have loved. Like you said, the pumpernickel bread, the naan, you'll never try these different things. So it takes that courage to take that step out of what you know and what you believe and what you're comfortable with, to really learn about who you are and what are the things that really ignite the fire inside of you. So, right. Lane, first off, let me thank you so much, and I'm so glad we finally got to do this, because this was great having you on the show, and I love your message, and I love the work you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege, and I love you, and I just appreciate being here.
And so before I let you go and before I do my little closeout, I always love to allow the people to share whatever it is they're working on, their best stuff, where they want to direct people. So we have the StressSlayer, alloneword.com. And what are the other resources that listeners can pick up from you, and are there any other sites that they should go to?
No, they just basically go there. They can see my blog. They can see how to help themselves. They can see how to work with me. They can see books that they can read. And it's really one-stop shopping.
Perfect. Well, that makes
it... Thank you for asking.
Oh, of course. Well, it makes it... Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The StressSlayer on Facebook. Mm-hmm. I don't have a ton of fans. I just started my Facebook persona for the StressSlayer a while ago, but I give you kind of cool stress tips there. Mm-hmm. So that's another way that we can connect, and I'd love to see you on social media as well.
Awesome. And for anyone that connects with Lane on social media as a result of this podcast, let her know you heard about it from Overcoming Graduation. That would make both of us very happy. So Lane, thank you again. For all the listeners, thank you very much for listening today. It's always great to have you. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can search for Overcoming Graduation on iTunes or on Stitcher, or you can click on the links available in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about the OCG community and the OCG movement, visit overcominggraduation.com or check out Overcoming Graduation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you'd like to reach out to me directly to talk about the interview, provide recommendations for interviewees, give feedback about what you loved about today's show, or any other feedback, please reach out to me at brian@overcominggraduation.com. So, Lane, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
All right, if you hang out for 1 second after the call, and listeners, that's it for you. So have a great one, guys.